Hi, my name is Tim Vaughan, and in conjunction with my friend Marta Kyan, we have created this Introduction to Beekeeping presentation. It's not meant to answer all your questions about beekeeping. It'll just give people who have never had anything to do with bees previously some basic information on how they exist and how to manage the bees and what they do on a daily basis. Hope you enjoy the presentation. It'll be about 10 minutes or so. Just a little slide here to discuss what are the following insects. We've got a top right hand corner, bottom left hand corner, bottom right hand corner, sorry, bottom left hand corner, and a top left hand corner. The top right hand corner is a wasp. The bottom right hand corner is a yellow jacket, and you'll notice the bright yellow color. Then there's a bumblebee, and the one we want to talk about on the top left hand corner is a honeybee. And this is a close-up view of it, and you'll see in this picture they have a lot of hairs on the honeybee. A lot of the pollen does stick to the hairs on the so when they come back to the hive, they can collect some pollen this way. It's not their main method of collecting pollen, as you'll find out later on in the presentation, but it is one of the methods of creating it. So it's just to watch out for that. You'll see a close-up looking something like that. These are the three different types of bee casts, the different types of bees in the hive. There's just one queen. And yeah, she is from here, the line here, to down to the tip. That's her abdomen, and it is about 1.5 times longer than a regular worker bee. Now, the queen and the workers are females. The drones are the male bees, and there's about somewhere between 5 and 10% of the bees in the hive are drones. And we'll discuss later on what they do. That's the purpose right there. So we have some small amount of the size of the workers, so they're about 1.5 times smaller than the queen. The hive is made up of mostly workers, about 90%. And this is a close-up of the stinger for the honeybee, and it shows you how sharp it is, and you can see the hairs on the bee there as well, and it is barbed. So it's like a fishing hook, basically, that once it goes into your skin, it gets stuck, so it doesn't pull out very easily. It's very difficult to pull out. And it is hollow as well, so the venom, the poison, is injected out through the stinger. This is a microscopic view of a stinger, what it actually looks like right at the end of it. So you can see the little barbs, and that's what gets stuck in the skin, in your face or hands, or even through your clothes. It can get stuck in there and is very difficult to pull out. And the best way to pull it out if you do get stung by a honeybee is to use a fingernail and scrape it off. Do not squeeze to get or pick it out with a tweezers. That's probably the worst thing you can do. The reason being, on this picture right here, this is the remnants of a honeybee right here. This is a part of the rear end of the honeybee, and it is attached to the bee. And once the stinger goes into your body, the barb or the stinger stays in, and it pulls part of the honeybee with it, so it kills the honeybee. And so, as a last resort, only the honeybee will sting. They don't want to do it. It is their protection mechanism. The honeybee knows once they sting, they die. So they want to prevent it at all costs. So they only do it when they're protecting themselves, the hive or themselves. And this is a quick synopsis of what actually is in the hive. There's about somewhere between 30,000 to 100,000 bees in a hive. All right. There can be more than that. There's one queen, as I discussed earlier, and her job around about this time of the year, which is mid-May, is laying about 1,500 eggs a day, which is quite a lot. In the January, February, she's only laying maybe 100 or 100, 200 eggs a day. And as it builds up to the prime season right now for honey nectar collection, she's laying a lot more. The drones, 200 to 300, it can depend on the season. Around about now when it's mating season, there's a lot more. And once it comes into the fall, they are all killed off. So those drones are kicked out of the hive and they all die. So there's no drones survive the winter. Very, very, very few anyway. And the rest of the bees are worker bees, and those are made up of nurses at the beginning. Then they turn into guards protecting the hive, and then they're gatherers connecting collecting nectar and pollen for the hive. These are pictures of the queen here, and the queen is painted. In some cases they're painted. There's 5 different colors of classification of colors, and that's repeated every 5 years. So you can look by the color of a queen and you can tell how old it is. Now, not everybody paints the queen. You have to catch the queen and you put a little dab of paint on her. It's quite difficult to do. So you can actually kill the queen when you do it, so you have to be very careful. This is the stages of bee development, important for what actually happens to the bees. And it's written here in for what it is. The first 3 days they're an egg, and then they change into various stages of larva and pupa. But the important thing here to note is that the queen hatches in 15 days. The workers hatch in 21 days, the females, and the drones hatch in 24. And most of the problems that arise with the queen's issues are Africanized bees, which are that's the term used for them because that's where they originated originally, and those queens hatch in 14 days. So if an Africanized bee comes in and lays some eggs, queen lays an eggs in your hive, and that queen will hatch in 14 days, and that queen would actually hatch out first and then kill the other queens that are there. So generally the first queen that is born goes and kills all the other queens in the hive, so just to ensure there's only the one queen, as we said earlier. The drones are 24 days, which is quite a long time, and most of the time there's little mites that infect the bees, and those mites lay eggs in the drone cells, and therefore it takes the longest for them to survive, and they do better in the drone cells. So it's just one preventative method of killing them, and I'll go through that in the presentation when we do the hive tour. These is the approximate days of what the bees do in the hive. Again, bees can't read, so we're working with approximate video tours, video perceptions of putting a little small camera in the hive and watching what the bees do. They can put these little trackers on the bees now, and they can follow them for their lifespan and see how long they're doing certain jobs. In this case here, they're using the days 1 to 3. They're born, they're cleaning out the cells. Days 3 to 6, they're feeding the older larvae. Days 6 to 10, feeding the younger larvae, and then they're days 8 to 16, they're receiving the pollen from the other bees that are foraging. So once the bees go and forage, they bring it back. Then they pass the nectar off to these nurse bees. Then they regurgitate it and put it into the cells to store it. Then it's wax. They make wax from a little gland behind their wings, days 12 to 18. So that is either to make new comb or to cap the nectar that's in the hive. And then day 40 and onwards, they're either guarding the entrance or they're foraging for nectar and pollen. And then the surprise for most people, they live only 40 days, about 6 weeks. They do survive longer over the winter when they're trying to sustain their hive, because they kind of basically go into a hibernation state. Not really, but it's the closest example I can give in this short presentation. So the bees that are collecting the nectar and the pollen are only collecting the nectar and the pollen for their future sisters that haven't been born yet. And so they're collecting the nectar right now in May, and the nectar will be used in October, November through February to keep the hives alive. So this is just a video of a bee being born, and it's a small video. This video here just shows a little bee being born. All the bees have been taken off of the comb, so there's comb and this is capped brood, and again, so it's a female bee, so we know that this is 21 days old brood. The brood is 21 days old, and normally when this bee hatches, you can see the wings are not fully formed. It does have a stinger at the bottom, but there will be other bees feeding it straight away. So once it is born, bees feed it straight away with the nectar and the pollen is placed close by, and the nurse bees will feed it straight away to give it some strength. You can see some bees here are coming out, and there's a little tongue sticking up from this one bee here, and that normally would be fed. But as I said, I just took the frame from the hive for the space of a couple of minutes, brushed the bees off it, took the video and put it back in. So the remaining bees would have been fed by their sisters. And as I said, this bee is just walking around looking for some food right now because she doesn't actually know what to do. This here shows the honeybee, a female honeybee, returning with a sac of pollen on her two back legs. Now this is a kind of a clear membrane on the back of her leg, for all intents and purposes, just like a pocket on a pair of jeans. And the honeybee stuffs the pollen into this sac and flies back with it. As you can see, this is a kind of a cream colored pollen, and there's white and yellows and oranges and all the different colors flowers that come back. So they use the pollen to feed the young bees and sustain them, give them nourishment, give them nutrition, and it's a fantastic nutritious food. This is a picture I took myself of a honeybee. I just wanted to take a picture of it. I put some honey on the top of a hive, and the view of it shows the honeybee. I've zoomed in here so you can see it a little bit better. The tongue is hollow. It's like a straw, so this bee is sucking up the honey up through her nose, her tongue, and swallowing it, and then passes it on to the other hives later on to regurgitate it. They do this with the nectar. This happens to be honey, very, very light, thin honey that I used. These are examples of what the hives look like. You can see the bees congregating in front of the two hives here on the left. The hive on the right just shows the basic frames of what it looks like. The bottom bar here is where the red is right now, is the baseboard. That's where the bees fly in and out. Then these are the supers. The pink one here is a super. That's number 1 and number 2. These two boxes are where the queen lays her eggs. She's prevented from rising up any further from this queen excluder. I put that in there purposely to prevent her and keep her down to the bottom 2 boxes. Some beekeepers don't use them, but it keeps the queen below this line. So it's a little metal bar or a plastic bars. So she can't go up because she's slightly bigger. So it's just only allows the workers to go up and down. So they put the honey up here then. So they're putting the nectar into spots right here, these 2 top boxes of honey, and that can be taken off at a later stage. So these are things that can go wrong in a hive, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong in a hive. Colony collapse, weather, diseases, pests, robbing and swarming in urban environment, a lot of things. Main one here being this one right here. This is the main issue with bees. And again, I'll discuss this at the beehive tour presentation. But this is the main one that causes most of the problems. The next one is probably the mites, are probably the next poorest thing. If you're really interested in helping, these are some things you can do to help out. And basically, either getting your parents to buy bee-friendly plants, mostly organic, to be fair, and there's no pesticides and they're not genetically modified. The genetically modified plants generally are bad, and I'm sure your science teachers are helping you along to understand why that is. But it certainly prevents weeds, but it kills the bugs. And these pesticides and genetically modified foods don't distinguish between good bugs and bad bugs. They just kill all the bugs. So we need the honeybees for the nectar and pollen, so it just shows right here. Avoid toxic and persistent chemicals on your lawn or on your path. You know, don't kill the clover, don't kill the dandelions. The bees love it. This is fantastic. If you are really, really interested, you can become a beekeeper by going to your local beekeeping association, take some classes, and learn from a mentor. There's plenty of people to help you and teach you along the way if you wish. These are a few questions. What is the primary function of the drone bee? We discussed it earlier, so we're looking at B here being the answer. All right. Their main purpose is to mate with the queens. That's all the drones do. They are born and they live to mate with the queens. Once they mate with the queen, they die, and that's it. So, next question. What phenomena is responsible for the continual loss of the honeybee? All of the above is the correct answer in this case. These things are really bad. The mites, as I said, are particularly bad. The pesticides are bad. Colony collapse disorder is caused by a mixture of all of those two, and there's a lot of problems that the bees have to sustain and endure now in comparison to what was, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So this slide shows which crop is pollinated primarily by honeybees. The correct answer to this is actually all three. They are absolutely crucial for all of these crops to be pollinated. And probably, if there had to be one that's most important, is the almonds. California has to import bees from all over the country, millions and millions and millions of bees to pollinate their crops. It will not work otherwise. You just get no crop from the almonds. Apples in the northeast and blueberries as well are crucially important that they're pollinated, and people actually transport truckloads of bees to all three of these. So they will go from almonds to apples to blueberries with all their loads of bees just to pollinate, and they're paid handsomely for doing so. It does cause a lot of problems, but it's a good system. Hope you enjoyed the little introduction, and hopefully enjoy the beehive tour in a few days. Thank you for joining.